For those who did not attend the lunch, I'm Claudia Prado. I'm a partner at Baker McKenzie, originally from Brazil, but currently I am a member of our Global Executive Committee. I'm chair of the Latin American region, the first woman to take this role in the history of the firm, chairing the Latin American region. And I also have the pleasure of being the chair of the Global Diversity and Inclusion Committee, so there is a lot of learning and intersection between my different roles. Today here we have an excellent panel of law firms. It was very interesting for us to hear the clients, which is a good segue to what we will be discussing. Before introducing the panel here, we are going to have a short presentation. I'm sure that you all have enjoyed a lot the prior discussion, hearing from our clients. I think that's the best way for the law firms really to understand what the clients expect from us. And a lot of things I'm sure that will make a lot of sense for all of us in discussing our programs. So we will start with a presentation from Gabrielle Brown, who is sitting here on my left, already ready to go. She is director for the New York Bar Association, diversity and inclusion director, I'm sorry. And she has been leading the association efforts to enhance diversity in the legal profession, working with law firms. So she adds a lot of value in that respect, corporate legal departments, and nonprofit organizations and educators. Today she will be sharing with us insights from recent research on metrics for diversity and inclusion, and best practices as well. Then I would like already to present our panelists so we don't interrupt the discussion. To my right, far right, Paula Zamper Salazar, partner at Gomes Pinzon Zuleta from Colombia. Paula is a member of the corporate and the real estate groups, and she's also director of the pro bono practice at the firm. She has been recognized for her work in pro bono in Colombia, receiving awards in that regard, and also for advancement of women in the legal profession. Welcome, Paula. To the far left, Carolina Zhang from Argentina, managing partner at Zhang, Bergel & Vinis. I hope I pronounced well. Carolina heads the banking and capital markets practice and is a member of the International Steering Committee of the Women in Professional Program at the Cyrus Vance Center for International Justice. She has also contributed to the development of a mentoring program within the firm, and which has also received an award from Chambers. I'm sure that we will hear more about her experience with this mentorship program. To my left, Barack Eccles, a partner at Kirkland & Ellis. He's a litigator partner based in Chicago. A member of the firm's diversity committee and racial and ethnic minority subcommittee. So we discussed a lot also on his experience, not only with gender, but also on this important stream of diversity. And he sits on the board of the Institute for Inclusion in the Legal Profession. Many of you know him also for this role. And finally, last but not least, Gustavo Membiela, partner at Hunton & Williams. He's, oh my God, another litigation partner based in Miami, and serves as a co-chair for the firm's Inclusion and Committee. With that, I will ask Gabrielle to present her topic, and then we can go back to the panel.
Thank you, Claudia. And I'm going to set a timer because I'm a talker, so I need to know my time limit. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Gabrielle Brown. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion here at the New York City Bar Association. I want to thank Sandra, Adriana, and Judy for inviting me to participate in this conversation. If there's anything that we've learned in the last 10 years of this research, it's that We learn so much from just talking to one another. So I'm delighted to share with you some of the findings in our research today, but even more delighted to participate in the conversations this afternoon and hear, what initiatives you're taking to advance diversity within your respective firms and corporations that we can translate to our signatory law firms. The New York City Bar has been collecting and analyzing the diversity metrics of more than 130 law firms for 10 years when we founded the office in 2004. We collect the representation of minority and women attorneys at the associate level as they ascend to partnership, and then their attrition data to get a snapshot of what the profession looks like. After 10 years of collecting this data, we realized that we didn't really know what these numbers meant, and they weren't as helpful as we hoped they would be. So we shifted our survey significantly. We updated it to get a better snapshot of each of the racial and ethnic identities within these categories. We sent the firm reports directly to law firm leadership, and then we incorporated a qualitative element where we asked law firms to submit practices that they put into place and data to support that, and conducted more than 30 hours of qualitative research to kind of mine that data. And what we came out with is a set of better practices that I'm going to go over with all of you. This is truly a test of whether or not I know our metrics because I can't see these slides. So if a data point is off, what I want to share with you first is just where we are in 2015. And as I provide context on this data, just understand that this is law firms that over a decade ago pledged a commitment to diversity and inclusion. So these numbers, while we'll talk about some gains and challenges, we really want to see a little bit more movement here. We saw steady gains in representation of women and men of color at the associate class, and then even more in 2015. The bold numbers are numbers that have increased year over year, or improved year over year. At the special counsel level, and we saw gains for white women partners who peaked at 19.7%, or women partners who peaked at 19.7% in 2015. That persistent challenge remains, though, that at the law firm leadership level, at the very top of this pyramid, 75% of partners in these firms are still white men. So we needed to figure out a way to engage them in diversity efforts, because if we're relying just on the representation at the top there, that's not enough. The numbers don't represent enough critical mass to affect meaningful change. Our LGBT attorney data, we're working to improve this, but we're at 3.4% of attorneys in signatory firms and 0.52% of attorneys with disabilities. These data points are a little harder to collect, so as we're working to improve our survey, we're looking to address these numbers as well. So that's the lay of the land. I don't know why this is not working. So just to provide some context to that, women attorneys peaked, women partners peaked at 19.7%, but we found that 15% of those were women of color, and so that drops to, and as we dropped into the specific racial and ethnic identities of women of color partners, of all partners in New York City firms, Black and African American women make up 0.5%, and Hispanic women make up 0.3%. So we saw gains there, but really having that context of what that looks like, gave us a very narrow focus. Minority attorney representation remains relatively flat year over year, but we did see gains at the special counsel level and a bit more representation in leadership bodies within the firms, which we identify as practice group heads, members of management committee, office managing partners, and firm-wide managing partners. But we have seen steady erosion in the minority and women associate pipeline at the 3rd through 5th year and 7th and 8th year. One of the things that we realize is we don't have a lot of information about why people leave firms, and from a generational perspective, we can't really tell if that's just attrition that is consistent with millennial patterns, professional patterns, or if there are really issues there. So this year we're launching a voluntary attrition survey to provide a little bit more context there. But it's notable to put a pin in it because here, the voluntary attrition numbers, we provide 18.4% of women and 20.8% of minorities leave firms compared to 12.9% of their white male peers. And we've seen, like I said, LGBT attorney representation has more than doubled since we started collecting the data, but at 3.4%, we think that's still underreported. And we see a continued disappropriate representation of women and minority attorneys, disproportionate representation of women and minority attorneys in income partnerships rather than equity partnerships, where turnover is a little bit higher. We have seen increased use of and a little bit more creativity with flexible work arrangements, which historically have been used for women who are transitioning in and out of firms to raise families. We've now seen those used to provide a little bit more career fluidity to millennial lawyers and young lawyers. And then we've seen enhanced diversity efforts in the firm, and really, this was the most compelling part of our survey because we invited law firms to provide an answer to this question, and about 70 firms sent us a better practice, something that they put in and said, we devoted a lot of time and energy and financial resources into this program this year. Here's the turnover that, the improvements that we saw in those categories. And when we collected those as an aggregate of all firms that were applying programs that were similar to that in our data, we saw that there was steady movement in them. Jordan. So just the lay of the land again, what we saw with our data from the data perspective, again, it's tough to just use the data points to figure out where we are, but I think this makes a clear reason for investing in diversity and inclusion. The top graphic is women attorneys, and the blue bar is white women, and the colored bars are women of color. And you see that there are pretty consistent gains all the way. There's a bit broader diversity for women that increases as you ascend into the leadership roles, which is the complete opposite trend for men attorneys, which gets smaller and smaller, where white men make up almost 80% of equity partners in New York City firms. And so we did this better practices. The methodology for this was we allowed the firms to provide the information in the survey. We then read every single better practice and put it into categories. We then saw a couple categories that were consistent firm to firm, and then mined their data compared to the overall data. If a law firm, the data was performing at a significant percentage increase over all the other firms in the category that aligned with that practice, we considered it a better practice. We then, just to make sure that we had as much context as possible, provided the qualitative interviews. So we spoke with, in a firm that had a better practice, typically an associate, a partner, sometimes even the managing partner and or the diversity professional, to see if that was translating throughout the firm. We came up with 3 main categories. We provided the better practices in bulleted forms inside the report because we think everybody needs a starting point. And what we found was every firm, like I said, 90% of firms that participated in the survey provided us with a better practice, but a lot of them seemed to be going at it completely alone, investing their own internal resources to start a program for women's sponsorship or to elevate minority attorneys to partnership levels. And what we wanted to do was say, other firms are doing this, so you should talk to each other. And then for some firms, when we conducted an interview with them and found out that their data aligned with our idea that we thought this was a better practice, we just provided the firm so that you could get in touch with somebody there and say, help us, this is something we're also trying to do. We were surprised by how hard it is to make people collaborate and work together, but I think if we start this conversation, and I know today is really very positive for me that you're going to do the same thing. I think as we continue to share resources and ideas and streamline these processes, we'll see a greater change. Gosh. So the biggest category that we focused on was attorney development. The elements that make an attorney successful in a law firm are universal. So we wanted to focus on initiatives that really drilled down on enhancing the skills and opportunities and access and reputation internally and externally of associates within the firm. This aligns with some of the conversations that the last panel was having, and I think we'll see these patterns in the conversations with the panelists this afternoon and in your group discussions. But where we saw the most movement was when a firm was investing in business development and leadership training for attorneys, sending them out to have coaching and skill development, understanding what leadership presence means, and then having career planning opportunities. The engagement from leadership really matters. So having practice group leaders and managing partners invested in diversity efforts, we saw movement there. Any opportunity to expand their practice area expertise, we see this a lot externally. If they're sitting on a board or organization or a bar association committee that aligns with their practice area, we saw a lower level of attrition and higher elevation to leadership roles. And then these sponsorship programs, I know some people have started this, have heard of this. We saw a lot of movement here where law firms are intentionally pairing partners and associates to have one person responsible for the career trajectory of their associate and their development. And then helping associates see a multi-year plan for themselves, so developing these action plans for associates. And then any external resources that could be made available to them. We saw a lot of movement with law firms that have executive coaches on hand to provide feedback to associates. Feedback is so subjective within a firm. You can get different feedback from different partners and really not be able to navigate that. And we found that having one person as a coach to kind of guide you and inform you and aggregate that feedback for you is really powerful. I don't know where I'm supposed to point this. Went too far. The client perspective. I love that today's program started with the clients, because I think these are huge drivers. So when clients were communicating, when the client relationship was really strong, we saw that there was a firm assessment of the client team composition and what matters diverse associates were working on, how actively engaged they were, or if they were just being pulled into the meetings or not taking on a leadership role. Any initiatives to strengthen relationships with clients, we saw a number of firms provide programming where they would invite the clients in to participate in the program with the associates in the firm for these natural networking opportunities. And then efforts to enhance gender diversity on corporate boards. Law firms that had invested in that kind of couples with the leadership development in the first better practice, in that it takes a certain element of a good lawyer to sit on a board, a corporate board, so you have that training in place, and then you're transitioning them into these leadership roles externally, and it has a mutually rewarding benefit. And then also, I know this was mentioned in the last panel, but I can't understate the importance of implicit bias training within the firm. We have worked with a number of firms that know it's good and know it's great, but many people in the room have never taken the IAT, the implicit association test. They don't know the pulse of the culture within the firms. So training partners to understand and interrupt implicit biases, and to really focus on how they're providing feedback to diverse associates. And then implementing bias neutralizers for associates. So that's understanding where bias may come into decisions that are being made about them in the firm and interrupting those. And then monitoring exit interviews. I think all three of these have to come from a third party that can provide context to the culture of the firm that you can't get, that people just aren't comfortable sharing. And I think bias interrupters are a really powerful tool, because I think if people don't see themselves as part of the problem, they often don't see themselves as part of the solution. So when you put people in a room and focus on that implicit bias training, everybody realizes that this is just part of the science of implicit bias, is that our brain takes shortcuts in the 11 million pieces of information that we consume per moment. How we filter those and how we focus on making these decisions about how we interact with our colleagues requires slowing down those processes. So I think they're really great, valuable learning mechanisms for the firms. And so I think what we found with our better practices is that the other core component of this is anybody can do these things. You don't require a minority or woman partner to lead the charge in these kinds of programs, particularly in that skill development. If you have 75% of partners are white men, ostensibly my interactions with white men they've always been eager to share the skills and lessons that they've learned in their careers and help to advance associates through those tracks. And then once you've put these programs into place, I think it sends a clear message to the associates that are ascending through your associate classes that the firm cares about their investment and wants to see them stay in the firm and succeed. And it stops being, I think we need to reframe the message. I think these programs don't really address a diversity problem, but really highlight an opportunity for a lot of progress to be made. You can get people involved in these. These have an impact. People like to get involved in something that's positive and will have a positive change. And so they're doing, if you're adding something to people's already busy plates that has a positive impact, I think they're more likely to get involved. And going back to that implicit bias element, when we think about where cognitive shortcuts occur, it's when we're tired, stressed, and busy, and overworked, which makes law firms essentially a breeding ground for implicit bias to take root, right? So, I think just putting that on the table and allowing people to work through that is really powerful. I think what we found with the better practices is that everybody needs to make a concentrated effort to do something. There's an element of this that everybody can take on. And if you're not on the diversity committee, or you're not the chair of it, or you're not super involved, there are short, easy, low-risk things you can do every single day. So we provided, organizational strategies within the Better Practices section of our report. We also created individual strategies. So we made managing partner toolkits and attorney toolkits, and we're releasing a client toolkit. Just bulleted list of things you can do on a day-to-day basis. We broke that down even further and made bias interrupters. So on a level of very easy, thinking about who you sit next to when you walk into a meeting versus leading the charge and putting policies in place in your firms, and the wide array of opportunity between those things. These are all available on our website for free. We're happy to share them. We're happy to walk you through them. And we also use biasinterrupters.org, which is Joan Williams' research that has a myriad of toolkits for individuals to bring into their organizations. This is going to take a lot of time. Our fastest moving data point in our report is women partners, and they're moving at 0.3% every year. So it's going to take a couple decades to see the numbers that we'd like. I think focusing just on the numbers completely eliminates the possibility of change that can happen when you're changing the hearts and minds of people within the firm and impacting somebody's career positively. So I hope that today's conversation on the panel and in your breakout sessions will inspire and encourage you to get involved with your firm's initiatives, to encourage other people to get involved. And I hope that we can all work together to make this a much more inclusive profession. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I have asked Gabrielle to continue sitting here because through the panel discussion, if anyone has questions on the presentation, I'm sure that you will be happy to answer. I think that the topics will relate a lot. So the topic of our panel is leveraging metrics to guide firms towards inclusions. For me, this translates very simply into stop counting people, but making people count. So it's not only about measuring and having the numbers, but also how to drive the programs to make people count and make people included. But as we were discussing over lunch, I think that the programs are very important, but as important is also to continue to measure the results, not only to drive the programs in a strategic way, but also to make leadership accountable. So we heard earlier from our clients how our clients measure and assess us, the law firms, on D&I. And now this panel will be about how the law firms are reacting to what the clients are asking and how we are assessing ourselves and providing the programs for that. When we were discussing this, as I mentioned over lunch, at least at Baker McKenzie, we, about 5 years ago, were very brave in establishing gender aspirational targets, really to promote more women into partnership. But I don't think that in the discussions we had in preparation for this panel, many firms have been doing that. So this is already a challenge that I have for the panelists, really to think about how to have those targets, because again, if we don't measure, if we don't have clear objectives, it's very hard also to drive the changes. But I would like perhaps to start with Paula, asking for a couple of examples of how you have been using your firm indicators and monitoring the results in terms of really measuring the success.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. First of all, and thank you to all of my Colombian lawyers who are right now watching this through the webcast. I think we have like 25 attorneys in Colombia in the same room. They all from different firms, which shows the level of collaboration that we have in these issues, which I'm very grateful for. Colombia is not a very typical country compared to our neighbors. I don't know if you are aware, we have, of course, many problems, but one which we don't have is the access of women to high business positions. Recently, there was an inquest saying that 40% of the high executive business positions in Colombia are occupied by women. However, I wanted to say a couple of things about what we're doing in our firms about women and other diversity issues, because I noticed that the title of the panel, fortunately, was diversity and inclusion in general, which I liked. At the beginning, I didn't know what to say regarding the other aspects of inclusion, not women issues, but other issues of diversity, but then I have a couple of ideas. The first thing is, I read an article in the Harvard Business Review which says, one tool of any organization or at any organization's disposal is the way its leaders choose to talk or not to talk about these differences or the diversity. And that's one thing I was going to say. In Colombia, we don't talk so much about these issues. And you've been saying, for example, how clients ask law firms about their diversity programs. Let me tell you, I've been in my firm for 25 years, and I think I have gotten 2 letters from clients in these 25 years asking us for our diversity programs. I don't think I've got more than 2. Those 2 came from US multinationals, of course. So I think that still has to happen in Colombia much more. In our firm, we started, of course, with the idea that we didn't want to lose women who started their families, and we started doing those type of flex time programs, et cetera. And it was a very good start. But then the wonderful thing is that these young women then led the discussion, and they have their own women committees in all of the firms. In fact, that's why they are meeting all to watch. We have been very proactive as a committee of 25 law firms, encouraging the discussions in diversity. I'm sure these discussions have been very successful. In fact, as I was telling you, Colombia has 50% of the lawyers in the main firms are women. The last survey that I saw, which had 85 law firms, showed 50% of women in the law firms. Now, in the partner level, we have 33%, which is not bad. I mean, I can see now that it's double what you have in New York. Of course, it's a smaller population, but we have 33% women in the partner level. Now, I wanted to discuss 2 minutes the other inclusion and diversity things, because it really was difficult for me to think about other diversity issues. And let me tell you, I don't think law firms in Colombia are diverse, apart from women, I mean. We are a very close circle. I don't know if that is the case in other Latin American countries. But just to give you a number, 60% of the lawyers of all these 85 firms come from 3 private universities. And that 60% come from 3 universities. These are 3 private elite universities. We don't have many lawyers from public universities, for example. We certainly don't have a representation of other races. We don't have a representation of lower social and economic level people. Now, universities are doing a very good job in being more diverse. They have opened scholarships and all that. So I think in the future, in the next decade probably, most of the students that the law firms are hiring are going to be more diverse. But right now, I don't think we are doing enough with regards to social and economic diversity in our firms. We don't even have policies for diversity in hiring, for example. So I think, Claudia, the issue of having metrics as the title of this panel was useful, because in any case, it made me think that we have to start doing some projects for that. I mean, for starting to measure the way we create diversity policies in Colombia. Of course, let me end by saying that it's difficult to be an activist sometimes. I heard Valeria during lunch saying that sometimes you have diversity fatigue. I think, I think that's a fatigue that my male partners have whenever I talk to them about the issues. It does create some fatigue to the leadership of certain firms, and we have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. I am very, very optimistic that the new generations of women and lawyers, I'm very fond of millennials, you know. I really love the way they see the world, and I think the new generation of lawyers will be more diverse than we are, at least more open than we have been. And finally, let me say that I'm just a believer that diversity is no longer like the right thing to do. It's an essential factor to compete with our competitors, to get the clients. I wish I had all the 5 clients that we had today on the panel. I only have Valeria, but the other ones, I wish I had them, because we really need these companies to start asking these questions to their law firms. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. So I think that with all the good recommendations that the 5 clients gave, you can already go back to Colombia with some takeaways on how to develop those clients. Just pay attention to everything that they are asking from us, really on the diversity front. But I think it's important not only to hear what the clients say, but also to convince our partners and our leadership that diversity is not only about what the clients expect. As a matter of fact, what they expect, it's really aligned with the strategies that we should have in our firms. It's the good thing for our talent, because, of course, if we don't have a good inclusion of people, we lose a big part of the talent. This affects quality. This affects innovation, as one of the panelists from the client panel also mentioned. And I don't stop also to remind the partners, because they like to hear that, and I mentioned this over lunch, that more diversity on the top, especially gender diversity, but any level of diversity, really brings also better financial results, because I think that there is a lot of data already that proves that engaged organizations which have the workforce feeling included and engaged, of course, they produce, they are more productive and generate better results. So it's not only good for the clients, but it's good also for the business. So I think that this is a good takeaway. But maybe to transition to Carolina, as I mentioned in the introduction, she got an award for a mentorship program that you have developed in the firm. If you could share with the rest of the group here what you have done and just some of the best practices in this program.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you to everybody. First, I would like to take only just 1 minute to go through Gabriel's presentation and give some, comments on Argentina. I don't know if my colleagues here will agree, but I'd like to say that with regards to, equity partnership, as you all know, we've faced a couple of years of stagnation in our economy. So firms, that was not easy for firms. So a lot of women left the firms. So because the firms were not making partners, or not equity partners at least. So a lot of women left firms, but a lot of these women established their own firms very successfully. So that is, I think, very interesting to point out. The other thing that I'd like to mention is that, unlike Colombia, we don't have a very good representation of women on board of directors, for example. And I'm giving you this information of public companies, which is, the only available information. I guess that until now, only one bank, and because it went public last year, has a woman on board. Okay, not even alternate directors. So she quit. Okay. And the reason was that I don't know which of the underwriters suggested to this bank that they had to have, a female representation on board. So that's unlike Colombia, this is our reality as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention about Argentina is that there's no collection of data. Our city bars, they don't collect data. I think that firms, we do collect data. We don't know how accurate is this data, but we don't have nothing like, the city bar collecting data. So in this regard, firms are more advanced. And I'm really proud also to say that the firms are really concentrated efforts right now in order to have, these programs and policies. Most of the firms in Argentina have programs and policies in place, such as, all of, flexi time, part-time, home office, extended paternity leave. All of these policies, firms are really advanced in Argentina right now. So these were a couple. And the last comment is that, as in Colombia, I totally agree with Paula that lower social economic level is also something we need to count as a diverse issue in Argentina. It's very important. So I wanted to make these remarks before mentioning our mentoring programs. The mentoring program was an idea that came out like 5 years ago. Our firm faced like a major reorganization. Most of the founding partners left. As I say, we had a major reorganization, and right now, out of 11 equity partners, we are 5 women partners. I've been managing the firm since for 5 years now. And these 5 equity partners, they're all head of areas. So since then, the idea was that, and we really didn't know what to do. I was like the best of the worst to manage the firm. So no one taught us how to do this. So this is when, the idea of mentoring everybody from the very beginning, from the very scratch, was really a requirement for the firms to succeed. So this is how the mentoring program was put in place. So our 5, as I say, our 5 female partners are all of them are head of areas. All of them are in charge of the client relations, the budgeting for their areas, the business development, and all that stuff. And they really didn't know how to do it. And we started to think that mentoring from the very beginning was really needed. This is one thing. The other thing that we also reorganized 4 or 5 years ago, and this is also how another idea to establish in our mentoring programs, was that we reviewed our core values. Because we always talk about values, but I really didn't know 5 years ago what the values of the firm were. So we ended up with a list of 7 values, which is empathy, teamwork, honor your word, think big, commitment, excellence, client passion, and leadership. And then we started to revise where, inclusion, diversity, and gender issues, where there was a link in all of these values. So right now we know that you're a good leader of an area if you have a diverse group, and we require that. Right now we know that empathy, you're empathetic to the values. Sure. It's empathy, teamwork, honor your word, think big, commitment, excellent, client passion, and leadership. So we started, as I say, to look and revise where inclusion and diverse interlinked with these values. And right now, as I say, we know that you're a good leader if you have a diverse group, if you empathize with others' necessities. Think big. Part of thinking big is having a diverse group and try to include people. And this is how we started to think about all of these issues. We've also incorporated these issues in our partners' compensation. Part of our partners' compensation package is it's not fixed, it's how do you say?
Variable.
Variable. So in mentoring, mentoring is part of the compensation, and also, management issues as part of the compensation as well. And what we've done recently is we started a gamification technique where you give feedback, 360 feedback to everybody. Everybody is in your app. You give feedback based on these values, these 7 values, and you get a lot of information. So, and then you award, and you decide who to award or which value to award. So sometimes what we do is we award the associate or partner who gave a star to more women, in that particular month. Or we give the award to the women attorney who received more stars. But this does not happen every month. We just choose what to award when we see how our values are scored and how many stars, leadership received and who received the leadership stars, or how many stars, Think Big received and who received those. So this way we try to monitor where we are. And we give, for us, mentoring is a very important part of our strategy, and we really award mentoring.
Very good comment. So you can see that although in Argentina you may not have the richness of the information, the metrics that Gabriel has presented, but you have been using internally these metrics to your benefit to develop the programs. And what I like most, and again, hearing from our clients, you have been using these also to drive leadership involved in diversity and inclusion. Nothing better really than making the leadership accountable, because I truly believe that in diversity, if you want to move the needle, the leadership have to be involved. The tone has to come from the top. And it's not only about them buying the business case, but also feeling the accountability. So this idea of tying compensation to the progress of diversity, I think it's very brave. And I think that this is a good example to follow, because once the partners, and we will be talking that also, how different firms have been doing in influencing the managing partners and doing something. Once they feel the pain in their pockets, I'm sure that things may start to change in the firms also. I would like to hear our colleagues from the North Hemisphere about your experiences, especially with clients, because we have been hearing from our clients what they expect from us. If perhaps, Barak, you could start by saying how you have been addressing the clients here in the U.S. On their needs from a diversity standpoint.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I think that when you look at it from the U.S. perspective, some respects for those of us who have been involved in this, we don't think we are as far ahead as we would like to be. We all started from a situation, I believe, where opportunities were not being provided enough, and maybe there was just not enough attention to it, or not the realization of what value that could bring to the organization as well as to clients. These days we do have good clients like with General Electric, Alex Dimitrieff, a former Kirkland & Ellis partner, Valeria, who is one of my Leadership Council on Legal Diversity fellows from 2013. The clients make it known to us that it's important to them. They want the data. They want to know who is available to work on their matters. And they also then will sometimes check to make sure that the hours match the people whose faces came in the pitch book to see that they are there. Now, that's just the numbers part, and that's not really enough. Because, as has been discussed, you need to have those personal connections, not only with the external clients, the folks like were on the panel and spoke to us earlier, but internally, because the internal clients, the rainmakers, the 75% white male partners who run the firms, are the ones who play a big role in determining what the careers of the tanner people and gender different people, what their careers will look like. And so we've tried to put in place different aspects of our internal review system that would take that into account. So for instance, a few years back, we put in our review system, both at the associate level, at the income partner level, and at the equity partner level, a requirement that you have to write in your memo, what have you done in the past year to further diversity, inclusion, mentoring, recruiting? So you have to put it down. And if you're an associate or a non-share, an income partner, if you've done a significant amount, as Carolina was saying, you can get credit for that with your hours and with your bonus. And if you're more senior, you're a senior partner, it's kind of embarrassing if you have to provide the firm committee a memo and you've got a blank section, for that particular number where you're supposed to be explaining how you made the firm better that way. But the other thing that Claudia said is that these senior men attorneys who are non-diverse, they love to talk about themselves. They love to be involved, in mentoring and participating. And so what we have also put in place is we had a women's leadership retreat, we had a diverse partners retreat, and in both instances, we invited some of the most senior rainmakers to come and talk and explain a little bit about their careers. How did they get to where they were? Answer questions so that they could have that face-to-face interaction with people where sometimes the matters are staffed and you've got the person way up at the top and you've got 2 or 3 other people in between, and then the junior woman or the junior diverse associate never actually even gets to see the face of the senior person. They know the name and say, oh yes, I work for him indirectly through 3 different people. And we've tried to bring that also into a more informal setting where it may just be me or others who are on the diversity committee. We have this Kirkland Connection series, and either with clients or with the senior attorneys in-house say, hey, can you spare an hour and a half after work, grab cocktails and appetizers, and I'm going to bring 6 or 7 young attorneys, women, diverse, and you just sit and chat so you can meet them, meet who they are, so they can feel part of the broader organization. And you know what sometimes happens too is you make that connection, and that senior attorney is, oh yeah, I remember Valeria. She seemed really interested in this kind of transaction. Let me see if she will work on this deal. And so you can do this both formally with the review structure and informally of trying to make the more inclusive connections.
Thank you, Derek. Gustavo, would you like to add with your experience?
Sure. So obviously this is something that the clients have come to us and said that's important, and as a firm, if the clients think it's important, we think it's we think it's important. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's the best way to serve the clients by having diverse groups. One of the things that we've done at the firm over the last half decade or so is there was one year where we had a partnership class that was not a diverse partnership class at all. Coincidentally, happened to be my partnership class, but we'll just put that to the side. But in response to that, the firm created what is a liaison committee. And the idea of the liaison committee was to take senior management people from the firm and other influential partners in the firm and really have them take an active look at the associates that are moving up through the firm and through the partnership ranks to make sure that we are giving the attention to associates where they're getting client exposure, they're getting client experience. They have not just one person that's taking ownership over their career and their ability to move up through the ranks, but that at the highest levels of the firm, there are people that are responsible as to whether this person is going to succeed or not within the firm. And we're doing that across the entire partnership demographic, not just through with diverse attorneys or women's attorneys, because I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that it's not just diversity and inclusion. I'm from Miami. I grew up in Miami. If you look at the metrics of a city like Miami, you're like, really, really diverse community, right? Should be okay. In terms of inclusion, Miami is not an inclusive community. It's very fragmented. You have all sorts of racial and socioeconomic problems within the community, and you need to carry that through, I think, to every to the corporate area, to the legal areas, and keep in mind that you have to be able to bring people together in order to effectuate change. And so it's important that everyone feels part of the process in one way or another in order to be able to get through and really effectuate diversity and inclusion change within the firm.
Thank you. A lot of good thoughts and comments, but I will challenge all of you. Last year at Baker, we have done an internal people survey, and we have done this survey within our 77 offices, 13,000 plus people, with very specific questions on diversity and inclusion. So it was an overall people survey, but included also diversity and inclusion. And as a result of this survey, the number one reason the scores came out, the responses, the number one reason for people to leave the firm, guess what, was lack of flexibility, which, as Valeria mentioned, the companies have been much more advanced than law firms in providing flexibility and agility in work. So this was the number one response that for us was not so shocking, but it was good to inform a new program that we just launched globally, which is an agility program, really to make sure that all the offices within the globe have policies on flexible work, which is not part-time. As Valeria said, it's not only lip service, but it is really to provide flexibility in the way we work. And the second thing that for us was quite shocking was a huge aspirational gap that we found between men and women. So we asked a simple question to all our associates: do you want to be a partner in the firm? And guess what? 78% of men responded yes, and only 53% of women responded yes. So there was a big gap on the aspiration also. And then we went back this year and conducted now a survey only with women to understand why, what are the reasons, and then we are finding more information. And one of the responses that came out already is not only confirming the lack of flexibility, but also the lack of role models. I haven't heard here from the panel anything regarding flexibility and role models, but please don't tell me anything about lip service. I really want to hear about programs that you are really launching and they are working well in your firms in terms of flexibility and role models.
No, I wanted also to mention that I heard a survey last week. I attended the IBA, the officers meeting, that there is this survey to millennials. They were asked if they want to be partners, and 68% responded no. I just wanted to add that figure to your...
It's true, but I think that, again, it has a lot to do with the way that people work in law firms. It goes back to the flexibility, and you made an excellent point, because when we developed our program, we made sure that this is not a program that it applies only for women. It applies to everybody, and quite the opposite. We are asking our male partners, senior partners, to take this program, really to lead by example, so the young generation see that this is all right, that they will have a career, and I'm sure that this is something that the new generation is asking. It's not only women. Anyone else?
Yes, Claudia, yeah. I wanted to say that I think these results that you mentioned are very typical of what the new generation of lawyers want, not only women, also men. I recently also asked people in our firm if they wanted to become partners, and really it's not much of the population. They do believe that they need more flexibility, not only women again, but also they did mention something about having leaders who inspire them. And that's something that the new generations want, having leaders or partners or bosses who really inspire them. And so I was going to say, if I was asked, like the last panel, what is one advice you would give, it would be that. On a day-to-day basis, be an inspiring person for all of the people who work for you, men and women, because that's the only mechanism that you have to keep them up motivated.
Thank you, Paul. I think that this goes really to the point of role models, which is really role models who inspire others to aspire to become partners. So you see that all the topics are very interrelated. Gabrielle, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I want to speak to that because I think that the generation of lawyers that's coming into the profession is more tech-focused and more entrepreneurial. So I think that to address that 68%, that's why we need to do this individual approach to figuring out people's career path is. I think the way that we've approached diversity for a very long time right now, and it's problematic, is that we want everyone who's a woman or everyone who's a minority lawyer to want to be partner and stay. And then the people who didn't even have that intention when they came into the firm are seen as a failure to achieve their diversity and inclusion goals. You know, if you're having conversations with people and you have relationships with people, you can redirect course when you realize that their career ambitions are different and match them up with a path that makes them successful in the firm. Because if they leave the firm, you want them to have a strong relationship so that they can bring business back. And they're not if the firm sees them leaving as a loss.
Thank you, Gabrielle. So, Barak, I think you have a comment, and then we will have to go into questions.
Yep, and just to respond to your question and to follow up on what Gabrielle said, one of the things that we're proud that we've put in place is an alumni network. And so, and this is a lot of it because as you heard from the clients, we have a lot of in-house women clients. And so keeping those attorneys who have taken some time off from our firm connected to the firm, and then also even providing them opportunities, notice when positions in our clients become available, has turned out to be a valuable way for us to to further that relationship with our women attorneys.
Thank you. Yes?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done within Hunton too is particularly the women's attorney group. As part of the associate training program, they've taken a very active role in building in either training as part of those associates programs or also having networking, mentoring, cocktail events after those, so that there is a constant communication there between attorneys that are in different offices, women attorneys that are in different offices, so that when there's an event in Texas, somebody like Susan, who's my partner in here, she can go down to she's down in Texas meeting with the women attorneys in Texas, so that there is that cross-selling and that ability to know the associates in the other offices, and then they can look up to someone like her who's the administrative partner within the business group and say if that's the path that I want, that's the path that I want. I think the other thing that it's important, law firms, U.S. law firms for a long time, we've taken this view that if you don't stay within the firm and become a partner, you've there's somehow that's a failure or whatever, which is so incongruous with the way most businesses work, that you discard good talent because they're not ready or they don't want to be a partner. And I think that's part of this is you need to be able to look at people within what their goals are and what they want to do, and sort of take advantage of the talent that's there.
Very good. I'm just seeing the time sign here, so just in time to open for questions. That's your time opportunity to learn from these experienced people from law firms on what they have been doing right.
Hi, I'm Susana Sáenz from Beretta Godoy in Argentina. I was wondering if, in your experience, Claudia mentioned the importance of flexi-pro programs or flexi-hour programs for the associates and for the partners as well. In your experience, have you experienced resistance within the law firm to implement this sort of programs for fear there will be a lack of productivity, or, the effort will not be as important as it was?
Not in implementing the program. I think we were very successful in implementing the program, and we've had many attorneys in flex time. In fact, our flex time is for 1 year after the birth of your son or daughter, and you get to stay at home half-time for 1 year. We have a 4-month license of maternity in Colombia by law, so this is a year plus the 4 months that you have by law. And all of them are very happy, and they earn their bonus. They have lower metrics. They have lower hours that they need to work. But I've started to see recently that when you have lots of women in the same department, in the same condition, that starts to be a little bit difficult because sometimes you have departments saying, well, why don't you hire a man, please? Because they have too many women in flex time right now, but in general, it's been successful.
Okay,
While
thanks.
while the mic comes here, I just want to make a point, because that's exactly the trap that we have and the bias that we have in flexibility. Because especially in Latin America, I think that a lot of people think that flex time, it's only for women who come back from maternity. This is wrong. This is something that we really have to change, and that's why at the firm we implemented this program, which is not to be applied, number one, for women, number two, for women who come from maternity. Of course, they can take that as well, but as I said, it's a program that is really open for everybody, and it's not time limited, because flexibility does not mean necessarily part-time. Our program includes part-time, of course, for those who really have a limitation of time, either because they come back from maternity or they have health problems or have to take care of older families. So this is one way. But the program that we are really implementing, and that I think that the new generation needs more and more, is really flexibility in all respects. And I think that clients do that very well. So, and clients understand very well. So the problem that we have is that there is still this stigma that people who are not working in the office with their lights on, they are probably not working, and this is not true. So with the metrics and with the information that we are collecting inside the firm, we are really breaking also this bias to show that productivity is not affected if you have the program right, if there is transparency, if there is maturity, if people really are very clear and open on how they are working. Nowadays, with technology, you can work from anywhere, anytime. As a matter of fact, one of the streams of our programs is exactly this, work anywhere, anytime. So it's about really having this commitment of continuing to work, continue to serve the clients no matter what where they are, without this bias that this is part-time and that it is time limitation. There is a time limitation. Did I respond to the comment that you wanted to?
To some extent, yes, because, I mean, what I was going to share is we just started at the firm a program for flex time for quote-unquote parents with children with the age below 2. And I think that this is very important, because by saying that all these programs are for women, we continue stigmatizing women. It seems as if children are made by, I mean, she has a wonderful story about someone who mentioned that she was very lucky because her husband took her children to school, and her answer was, he is very lucky because I pick his children from school. I mean, and I wanted to ask you whether you have, because we have so many dual career couples, but it's still always the women who take the flex times. Do you have experience about men taking sometimes this flex time to be able to take care of the children?
No.
Our
Short answer.
Well, we have an extended paternity leave now. In Argentina, it's only 2 days for the father by law. Our policy is a month. It's like 20 business days right now. We have a lawyer who took the month off, and he was just one lawyer. He was very happy. And also what we've implemented is for everybody in the firm have Friday off once a month without giving any explanation. And the only requirement is, the person who wants to take the half Friday off has to discuss it with the group, with the partner in charge, and that's it. And have the hours, the hours billed for until the day, and that's the only requirement, and everybody's very happy about that.
Our research supported in 2015 a higher percentage of men using flex work arrangements, and the better practice that we highlighted was a law firm that uses their flex program for lawyers who want to take 6 months to a year off to volunteer with a nonprofit, or somebody used it to write a book, or try out a different career path and easily transition back into the firm. And we highlighted that to eliminate from the conversation this idea that flex work is only for parents and only for women.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the path going forward again because of the generation. So it's not only about gender diversity, but it's about age diversity, generation diversity as well. Any more questions?
Hello.
I see one here.
She has a mic.
Oh, sorry. I think someone is... Go ahead. You had the mic first, please.
Well, thank you. My name is Carolina Palma. I'm with Pacheco Coto, Costa Rica. Thank you very much for these experiences. They're very enriching to us. I wanted to ask a question. Well, in Central America, we also share some of the same situations that you just mentioned, and there's a lot to do. Particularly in our firm, we have a task list of I don't know how many points, and sometimes it's difficult to kind of like focus and say, okay, what can we achieve in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term in diversity? So my question is, if you were to choose a starting point or one of the tasks where you would say, this is the one that we could focus on in the short term for the next year or so, in your experiences, because of you implementing this, and especially to the Latin American ladies here, what would you choose as a starting point, or as a one of the tasks where you would say, okay, this is the one that we should be implementing in the next year at least to be able to achieve greater diversity in our firms?
Okay.
Thank
Due
you.
to the limitation of time, I will ask one only to address the answer. Who would like?
I would say that have a women's issues committee in the firm and hopefully involve all of the attorneys, from the junior lawyers to the more senior partners, and start discussing the issues that they need on a day-to-day basis. That's really what I would do. And from that committee, from that group, I'm sure you will get a lot of ideas for policies, and just supporting them is the most important thing.
So we have one more question here, and then I think we will open for the questions on Latin America.
Sandra González, Ferrer, Uruguay. I was wondering if you have had any experience working with universities on diversity issues, so that when you are going to hire people, groups that are underrepresented are better skilled to navigate the law firms and get to better positions.
Sorry to answer again. The only program we're doing with the university is right now with the women's group in all of the 25 law firms that belong to the Cámara de Servicios Legales in the Andes, which in fact is where they're looking at us. We are doing a project with Universidad de los Andes in which they are going to make focus groups of women in all of the 25 firms, and we are going to repeat a survey that we did in 2012 regarding women in the profession issues in the 25 law firms. We're going to repeat it to see the development, the progress in these 5 years, and then the university is going to publish a study regarding that survey so that we contribute academically to the issue.
We have a mentoring program with Universidad de San Andrés, which is meant to discuss soft skills, those skills you don't get to learn when you study law. And this is a 4-meeting program with different panelists and speakers in a format of like a word cafe. So you get to, the students, the law students get to discuss with, the experienced lawyers, just practical issues and soft skills. And that's the second year we've been doing it. Ceci, Patricia, colleagues from Ferrer, from Uruguay, everywhere. Like, we're all invited, and it proved to be very interesting and very useful for law students.
Should we open the questions, or we don't have any time?
They don't have any questions, and I don't want to stand between you and the coffee break, so.
All right. That's the best question.
One last
Coffee
question,
break.
there's one last one.
Thank you. My name is Rebecca Garcia. I come from White & Case, Mexico. And my question for you would be how to enforce in practice the policies in a law firm when in reality you are facing very hard deadlines with the clients, and not everyone in the teams, partners and senior associates, are really committed to this kind of movement. When you try to, when certain associates are trying to invest in their career development via studies, or also flexible time when they are in one, I mean, in a part of their development as women or studying, how to enforce in practice, because normally partners talk about these kinds of programs, but in reality it's very difficult to follow the schedules. And so how is the proper way to manage that in a very diplomatic way in front of the partners?
Totally the opposite, not being diplomatic.
Well, I think that a lot has to do really with, again, the flexibility and make this work right. So it's really about balancing well the flexibility, but it's still serving the client. So things come hand in hand. It doesn't mean that because people are not in the office, they cannot be doing work. As a matter of fact, a lot of women who have been interviewed, they gave exactly this response. It's not a matter that we don't want to be working 24 hours. We just want to go at a certain point home to see our kids, to put them in bed, and then we go and work again. So it is possible to do that. It's just a way of transparency. This is more on the flexibility and make sure that this works, as you mentioned, in a way that we can still continue to serve the clients and to do the work, which at the end, I'm sure that all the clients here in the panel, although they love and are passionate about diversity and inclusion, they expect also the firms to be available and to be really serving them in the proper way. So I think that this is about the flexibility. But the other side of your question also, it's about the accountability. I think that we heard some good examples here on how to make those partners accountable, especially the senior leadership. So a way of also having them committed with their own compensation, I think that this is a very good way of driving the changes. So they don't only develop the passion, even if it is really under pressure, but they feel also that their compensation will be based also on the progress that they make in terms of diversity and inclusion. So if the firms take diversity and inclusion within their strategies, just as clients are important, people are important, diversity really ties into both, so they have to be accountable for that as well. So I think that that's another way also of making partners feeling more the pressure and enforcing the policies.